The plane hummed steadily as it cruised through the sky, 30,000 feet above the ground. Inside the cabin of Skylink Airlines Flight 457, everything seemed normal, or at least as normal as air travel could get these days. Passengers were either dozing off, scrolling on their phones, or flipping through magazines. It was one of those long-haul flights where time seemed to stretch endlessly. Dr. Marcus Johnson sat by the window in seat 23C, staring out at the endless expanse of clouds. He had just returned from an international medical conference in London, where he'd presented groundbreaking research on heart disease prevention. At 38 years old, Marcus was already well known in his field, respected not only for his expertise but also for his calm demeanor under pressure. But today, he wasn't thinking about work. Instead, he was mentally preparing himself for the jet lag that would inevitably hit once he landed back home in New York. Beside him, an older woman named Patricia quietly sipped her coffee while reading a paperback novel. Across the aisle, a young couple played a game on their phone, laughing softly. Everything felt ordinary, until it didn't. About halfway into the flight, a sudden commotion broke the monotony. A man sitting 2 rows ahead let out a sharp groan, drawing everyone's attention. His name was Richard, and he looked to be in his late 50s with thinning gray hair and glasses perched on his nose. Now, however, his face was pale and beads of sweat dotted his forehead. Clutching his chest, he slumped forward slightly, gasping for breath. "Help!" someone shouted, though no one moved immediately. Panic rippled through the cabin like a wave. People exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what to do. That's when Marcus stood up. "I'm a doctor," he announced firmly, stepping into the narrow aisle. "Let me see what's going on." He approached Richard quickly, assessing the situation even before reaching him. Chest pain, shortness of breath, sweating. These were classic signs of a heart attack. Every second counted now. Without hesitation, Marcus knelt beside Richard, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Sir, can you hear me?" Marcus asked. When Richard nodded weakly, Marcus continued, "I need you to stay calm. We're going to take care of this together." At that moment, Linda, the senior flight attendant, arrived. She was a tall woman in her mid-40s, with neatly styled blonde hair and an air of authority. Her uniform, a crisp navy blue dress paired with a matching hat, made her stand out among the other crew members. But despite her polished appearance, there was something cold in her expression as she looked down at Marcus. "Excuse me," she said curtly, her voice carrying just enough edge to command attention. "Who are you?" Marcus glanced up momentarily, surprised by her tone. "I'm Dr. Marcus Johnson," he replied evenly. "I'm a cardiologist. This man is having a medical emergency and I'd like to help." Linda crossed her arms over her chest. Her lips pursed. "Do you have any proof of that?" For a split second, Marcus thought he must have misheard her. Proof? In this situation? Still, he kept his composure, pulling out his wallet and showing her his medical license and identification card. "Here," he said, holding them up. "Does this satisfy your concerns?" Instead of responding directly, Linda turned to another passenger nearby, a middle-aged man who had been watching the scene unfold nervously. "Are you trained in first aid?" she asked him. The man hesitated, then nodded. "A little," he admitted, "but nothing serious." "Well, we'll make do," Linda said dismissively, turning her back on Marcus. "Thank you for offering, sir, but we'll handle this internally." Marcus couldn't believe what he was hearing. Internally, what did that even mean? And why was she ignoring his qualifications? He tried again, his voice firmer this time. "Ma'am, I assure you I know how to treat this condition. Time is critical here. Every minute counts." Linda didn't meet his eyes. Instead, she busied, herself organizing the onboard emergency kit, which contained basic supplies like aspirin, oxygen masks, and a defibrillator. Meanwhile, Richard's breathing grew more labored, his groans turning into shallow gasps. Marcus could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. If they didn't act soon, Richard might not survive. "You don't understand," Marcus pressed on, his frustration mounting. "This isn't something amateurs can manage. You need someone who knows what they're doing." Linda finally looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Sir, I appreciate your concern, but our company has strict protocols. Let us handle this." Her words stung, not because they were particularly harsh, but because they carried an undertone of dismissal. Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that if he'd been a different kind of doctor, perhaps older, whiter, or wearing a suit instead of jeans, she wouldn't have questioned him so aggressively. Still, he refused to give up. Stepping closer, he addressed the growing crowd of onlookers. "Listen, folks, this man needs immediate medical attention. Would you rather trust someone who actually knows what they're doing, or risk leaving this in untrained hands?" His appeal resonated with several passengers who began murmuring their agreement. One woman called out, "Let the doctor help. What's wrong with you people?" Another man chimed in, "Yeah, come on, this is ridiculous." Feeling the tide shift, Linda hesitated. For a brief moment, uncertainty flickered across her face. Then, reluctantly, she stepped aside. "Fine," she muttered. "But if anything goes wrong, it's on you." Marcus ignored her jab, focusing all his energy on Richard. Opening the emergency kit, he retrieved a dose of nitroglycerin and administered it carefully. Next, he attached an oxygen mask to help stabilize Richard's breathing. Throughout the process, he explained each step clearly, both to reassure Richard and to demonstrate that he knew exactly what he was doing. Minutes passed, and slowly, Richard's condition began to improve. His breathing steadied and the color returned to his cheeks. Though still weak, he managed a small smile of gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered hoarsely. Marcus nodded, relief washing over him. "You're welcome. Just try to relax now." As the tension eased, Linda retreated to the front of the cabin, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Around them, passengers resumed their activities, though whispers about the incident lingered. Some shot approving glances at Marcus, while others shook their heads in disbelief at how close they'd come to disaster. For Marcus, the ordeal wasn't over yet. As he returned to his seat, he couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper had happened here, something beyond a simple misunderstanding. The way Linda had treated him gnawed at him, raising questions he wasn't ready to confront. Was it racism, bias, or just sheer incompetence? Whatever the reason, Marcus knew one thing for certain: this wasn't going to end here. When the plane finally landed, Marcus Johnson was eager to put the incident behind him. He grabbed his carry-on bag from the overhead compartment and followed the stream of passengers disembarking onto the jet bridge. But as he stepped into the bustling arrivals hall of JFK Airport, he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in his chest during the flight. Instead of heading straight home, Marcus decided to stop by a quiet corner of the terminal. Pulling out his phone, he opened a note-taking app and began typing. At first, it was just a few sentences, a brief account of what had happened on the plane. He described how Richard, the passenger, had suffered a potential heart attack, how he had offered his help as a doctor, and how Linda, the flight attendant, had initially dismissed him. As he wrote, the words spilled out faster, fueled by frustration and disbelief. Before he could second-guess himself, Marcus posted the account on social media. He added a simple caption, "This shouldn't happen in 2023. Then he hit send and shoved his phone back into his pocket. He didn't expect much to come of it. Maybe a few likes from friends or colleagues who understood the gravity of the situation. That's all. But within minutes, something unexpected happened. Notifications started flooding in, likes, comments, shares. His post quickly gained traction, spreading like wildfire across platforms. Strangers began chiming in, expressing outrage over what they saw as blatant discrimination. Hashtags like "Find Your Respect Black Doctors" and "Charn Skylink Shame" started trending, drawing attention not only to Marcus's experience, but also to broader issues of systemic racism in corporate America. By the time Marcus reached his apartment, the story had exploded online. Celebrities, activists, and even politicians were weighing in, amplifying the conversation. Journalists scrambled to reach him for interviews, bombarding his inbox with requests. Reporters camped outside Skylink Airline's headquarters, demanding answers about their policies and practices. Meanwhile, Linda, the flight attendant, found herself at the center of the storm. Someone leaked her name and photo online, along with snippets of her interaction with Marcus. Social media users dissected every word she'd said, accusing her of racism and incompetence. Memes mocking her circulated widely, turning her into a symbol of everything wrong with corporate culture. Feeling cornered, Linda agreed to speak with reporters. In a televised interview, she defended her actions, claiming that her decision to question Marcus wasn't racially motivated. "I was following protocol," she insisted, her voice trembling slightly. "It's my job to ensure safety on board, and I needed to verify his credentials before allowing him to intervene." Her explanation did little to quell the backlash. Critics pointed out that Marcus had shown her his medical license, leaving no room for doubt about his qualifications. Others highlighted the double standard. Why hadn't she questioned the untrained passenger who admitted to having only basic first aid knowledge? As the controversy grew, Skylink Airlines issued a statement. It was vague and carefully worded, offering a generic apology for the unfortunate misunderstanding, without addressing the underlying issues. To many, it felt like a slap in the face, an attempt to sweep the matter under the rug rather than take real responsibility. The public wasn't satisfied. Protesters gathered outside Skylink offices in major cities, holding signs that read, "Bias has no place in the sky," and "Fire racism, not doctors." Calls for boycotts echoed loudly, with travelers pledging to switch to rival airlines. Influencers encouraged their followers to cancel upcoming flights booked with Skylink, further damaging the company's reputation. Amid the chaos, another voice emerged, Samantha White, a former Skylink employee. She came forward with stories of her own experiences working for the airline. According to Samantha, racial bias was rampant within the organization. Supervisors routinely overlooked minority employees for promotions, favoring less qualified, white candidates instead. Training sessions often included outdated materials that perpetuated stereotypes, and complaints about unfair treatment were ignored or dismissed. Samantha's testimony struck a chord with countless others who had faced similar challenges. Former employees flooded social media with their own accounts, painting a damning picture of systemic inequality within Skylink. One man recounted being passed over for leadership roles, despite years of exemplary performance. A woman described how coworkers mocked her natural hairstyle, calling it unprofessional. Each story added fuel to the fire, intensifying the pressure on Skylink to act. Back at home, Marcus struggled to process the whirlwind of attention surrounding him. On one hand, he appreciated the support pouring in from strangers around the GAR world. Messages of gratitude filled his inbox, thanking him for speaking out and shining a light on an important issue. Some people shared personal anecdotes, revealing how they too had been treated unfairly because of their race or profession. On the other hand, the sudden fame brought challenges Marcus hadn't anticipated. Trolls swarmed his social media profiles, hurling insults and accusations. Some claimed he was exaggerating the incident to gain publicity, while others accused him of playing the race card for personal gain. Reading these comments wore on him, making it hard to focus on his work as a cardiologist. Despite the negativity, Marcus remained steadfast. He knew the conversation he had sparked was bigger than him. It was about accountability, respect, and equality. When journalists asked if he planned to pursue legal action against Skylink, he replied thoughtfully, "Right now, my priority is ensuring this doesn't happen again. If that means taking further steps, then so be it." Behind closed doors, Skylink executives scrambled to contain the damage. Emergency meetings stretched late into the night as they debated strategies to salvage their plummeting stock price and tarnished image. Their initial attempts to downplay the incident had clearly failed, leaving them with few options. They needed to show the public and their investors that they were committed to change. In a desperate bid to regain control of the narrative, Skylink announced a series of reforms. These included mandatory diversity training for all staff, increased transparency in hiring and promotion processes, and the creation of an independent oversight board tasked with investigating discrimination claims. While some praised these efforts as a step in the right direction, Others dismissed them as performative gestures designed to placate critics without addressing deeper structural issues. For Marcus, watching the fallout unfold was surreal. He never imagined that a single moment on a plane would lead to such widespread consequences. Yet as he scrolled through endless threads of discussion online, he realized the impact went beyond Skylink. People were talking, not just about his story, but about the larger patterns of bias and inequality that persisted in society. Late one evening, as he sat alone in his living room, Marcus reflected on everything that had transpired. The incident on the plane, the viral post, the protests, the testimonials. It all felt overwhelming at times. But amidst the noise, one thing stood clear. Silence wasn't an option. Change wouldn't happen unless people spoke up, pushed back, and demanded better. With renewed determination, Marcus picked up his phone and began drafting a new message. This time, it wasn't just for his followers or the media. It was for anyone willing to listen. "We can't let this moment pass us by," he wrote. "Let's keep pushing forward together." The fallout from the incident continued to spiral out of control, sending shockwaves through every level of Skylink Airlines. Within hours of the scandal breaking, the company's stock price began its dramatic plunge. Investors panicked, dumping shares en masse as news of protests, boycotts, and lawsuits dominated headlines. By the end of the trading day, Skylink's market value had dropped by $600 million, a staggering loss that left analysts scrambling to make sense of what had happened. For Charles Bennett, the CEO of Skylink, the financial hit was only part of the nightmare. His phone buzzed nonstop with calls from angry shareholders, nervous board members, and frantic public relations teams. Each conversation ended the same way: demands for immediate action. Yet no matter how many promises Charles made or statements he released, the public's anger refused to subside. Desperate to regain control, Charles called an emergency meeting with his executive team. They gathered in the boardroom, a sleek space with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city below. But instead of appreciating the scenery, everyone stared grimly at the documents scattered across the polished mahogany table. On one wall, a large screen displayed real-time updates of the company's plummeting stock price alongside damning headlines. Skylink faces backlash over racial bias, passengers rally against discrimination, and will Skylink survive? "This crisis? We're hemorrhaging money," muttered Greg Harris, the CFO, running a hand through his thinning hair. "If this keeps up, we won't last another quarter." Charles leaned forward, his face lined with stress. "We need to fix this now. Not tomorrow, not next week. Now." He glanced around the room, searching for solutions. "What options do we have?" Samantha Lee, the head of communications, cleared her throat. "Public perception is key here. People feel betrayed and they want accountability. We can't keep issuing vague apologies, it's not enough." "And what about legal risks?" asked Robert Miller, the general counsel. "That doctor, Marcus Johnson, is already talking about filing a lawsuit. And if other former employees join him, we could be looking at class action territory." The room fell silent as the weight of the situation sank in. Skylink wasn't just dealing with bad press. It was facing potential lawsuits, regulatory investigations, and long-term damage to its brand. For a company built on trust and reliability, the stakes couldn't have been higher. After a tense pause, Samantha spoke again. "We need to go big, something bold, a complete overhaul of our policies, starting with leadership." Her suggestion sparked a heated debate. Some executives argued that drastic measures would only confirm the public's worst fears, that Skylink was fundamentally broken. Others insisted that half measures wouldn't cut it anymore. Finally, Charles raised a hand to quiet the room. "Fine," he said, his voice firm but weary. "Here's what we'll do. First, I'll hold a press conference tomorrow morning to address the issue directly. No more generic statements. We'll admit fault where necessary and outline concrete steps for change. Second, we'll launch an independent investigation into discrimination claims. Third, we'll revamp our training programs and hire external consultants to ensure accountability." The plan wasn't perfect, but it was a start. As the meeting adjourned, Charles stayed behind, staring out the window at the darkening sky. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, but failure wasn't an option. Not if Skylink hoped to survive. Meanwhile, Marcus Johnson found himself navigating uncharted territory. Requests for interviews poured in daily, along with invitations to speak at conferences and appear on television shows. While some praised him as a hero standing up against injustice, others attacked him relentlessly online, accusing him of exaggerating the incident for personal gain. Balancing his role as a cardiologist with his newfound status as a public figure proved challenging. One evening, after a particularly grueling day at the hospital, Marcus met with Emily Dawson, a civil rights attorney who had reached out offering her support. Over coffee, they discussed the possibility of taking legal action against Skylink. "You've got a strong case," Emily said, flipping through notes she'd prepared. "Not just for you personally, but for all the employees and passengers who faced similar treatment. A class action lawsuit could force them to make meaningful changes." Marcus hesitated. "I don't want this to become about me," he admitted. "This is bigger than one incident. It's about systemic issues that need fixing." Emily nodded. "I understand. But sometimes you have to use your platform to shine a light on those issues. Filing a lawsuit doesn't mean making it personal. It means holding them accountable so others don't suffer the same way." After much thought, Marcus agreed to move forward. Together, they drafted a complaint alleging racial discrimination and negligence, citing not only Marcus's experience but also testimonies from former employees like Samantha White. When the lawsuit was officially filed, it sent shockwaves through the aviation industry, further intensifying the pressure on Skylink. As the legal battle unfolded, journalists dug deeper into Skylink's history, uncovering troubling patterns of behavior. Emails surfaced revealing how executives casually referred to minority passengers as low-value customers when discussing cost-cutting measures. Internal memos outlined plans to reduce services for flights catering primarily to low-income travelers, many of whom belonged to marginalized communities. These revelations sparked outrage, leading to resignations within the company's leadership team. Among those who stepped down was Charles Bennett himself. Facing mounting criticism and dwindling support from the board, he announced his decision to retire early, citing health reasons. In his place, David Kim, a progressive leader known for championing inclusivity, was appointed interim CEO. David wasted no time implementing sweeping changes. Under his guidance, Skylink introduced mandatory diversity training for all employees, revised hiring practices to eliminate bias, and launched campaigns aimed at rebuilding trust with minority communities. He also established a hotline for reporting discrimination, ensuring complaints were handled promptly and fairly. Despite these efforts, skepticism lingered. Many doubted whether Skylink's actions were genuine or simply a PR stunt designed to weather the storm. Protesters continued to gather outside the company's headquarters, demanding proof that real change was underway. Back on the ground, Linda, the flight attendant, struggled to rebuild her life. After being fired following internal investigations, she found herself ostracized from the aviation industry. Applications for new jobs went unanswered, and her attempts to defend herself in interviews only deepened public disdain. Eventually, she took a position as a customer service representative at a small regional carrier, working long hours for minimal pay. Though bitter about her circumstances, Linda occasionally reflected on the choices that led to her downfall. She still believed her actions on the plane were justified, but she couldn't deny the role her biases played in dismissing Marcus. Late at night, lying awake in bed, she wondered if things might have turned out differently had she listened to him from the start. As weeks turned into months, the initial frenzy began to die down. Skylink's stock price stabilized, though it remained far below pre-scandal levels. Passengers slowly returned, enticed by discounted fares and promises of reform. Yet scars remained, reminders of a painful chapter that exposed deep-seated inequalities within the company. For Marcus, the experience transformed him in ways he hadn't anticipated. Though grateful for the support he remained focused on the bigger picture. Speaking engagements allowed him to advocate for diversity in healthcare, while the lawsuit kept the spotlight on systemic racism. Through it all, he held on to hope that his efforts and those of countless others would pave the way for lasting change. One evening, as he sat alone in his apartment reviewing notes for an upcoming speech, Marcus paused to reflect. The journey had been exhausting, often disheartening, but also profoundly rewarding. For the first time in years, he felt truly aligned with his purpose, to heal not just bodies, but systems too. With renewed resolve, he picked up his pen and began writing. Once more. The legal battle between Dr. Marcus Johnson and Skylink Airlines dragged on for months, turning into one of the most closely watched cases of the year. Courtrooms were packed with reporters, activists, and curious citizens eager to witness history unfold. For Marcus, it was both exhausting and exhilarating, a chance to hold the airline accountable while shedding light on systemic issues that affected countless others. At the heart of the lawsuit was a simple yet powerful claim: Skylink had discriminated against Marcus based on his race and failed to provide adequate care for passengers like Richard, whose life had hung precariously in the balance during the flight. But the case went beyond just one incident. It sought justice for all employees and travelers who had been mistreated due to bias, negligence, or outright prejudice. Emily Dawson, Marcus's attorney, proved to be a formidable force in the courtroom. Her sharp arguments and meticulous preparation left no stone unturned. She presented emails, internal memos, and testimonies from former employees that painted a damning picture of Skylink's culture. One document in particular stood out: a memo from senior management referring to minority passengers as low-value customers, suggesting ways to cut costs by reducing services on flights catering primarily to those groups. This isn't just about one bad decision, Emily told the jury during her opening statement. It's about a pattern of behavior that devalues human lives based on race and socioeconomic status. Skylink didn't just fail Dr. Johnson, they failed everyone who trusted them. On the other side, Skylink's defense team fought hard to downplay the allegations. They argued that Linda, the flight attendant, had acted within her rights by questioning Marcus's credentials, insisting it was standard procedure. They also claimed that any discriminatory practices uncovered were isolated incidents rather than part of a broader systemic issue. But the evidence spoke louder than their words. Former employees took the stand, recounting stories of being passed over for promotions, mocked for their cultural backgrounds, or ignored when they reported misconduct. Samantha White, the former staffer who had first spoken out, delivered a particularly compelling testimony. She described how supervisors routinely dismissed complaints from minority workers, creating an environment where discrimination thrived unchecked. It wasn't just one person or one department, Samantha said, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. It was the entire system. If you weren't part of the in-group, your concerns didn't matter. As the trial progressed, public opinion continued to sway in favor of Marcus and the plaintiffs. Social media buzzed with updates from the courtroom, and hashtags like "Drawing Justice for Marcus" and "Eindarn Accountability Matters" trended worldwide. Supporters rallied outside the courthouse daily, holding signs and chanting slogans. Even celebrities joined the movement, using their platforms to amplify the message. Inside the courtroom, tensions ran high. Executives from Skylink looked increasingly uneasy as each piece of evidence chipped away at their credibility. David Kim, the interim CEO, testified reluctantly, acknowledging past mistakes but emphasizing the company's commitment to reform. His testimony drew mixed reactions. Some saw it as a step toward accountability, while others viewed it as too little, too late. For Marcus, the emotional toll of reliving the incident day after day was immense. He often found himself replaying the events on the plane, the dismissive tone of Linda's voice, the hesitation before allowing him to act, the gasps of relief when Richard finally stabilized. It was a painful reminder of how close things had come to tragedy. Yet he refused to let the burden break him. Instead, he channeled his energy into advocating not just for himself, but for everyone who had ever felt marginalized or overlooked. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, in court, Marcus sat down with Emily to review the next day's strategy. "I never wanted this to become so personal," he admitted, rubbing his temples. "But I can't ignore the bigger picture. This isn't just about me. It's about making sure no one else has to go through what I did." Emily nodded, her expression thoughtful. "You're doing something important here, Marcus. Change doesn't happen overnight, but every step forward counts, and you're leading the way." Meanwhile, the fallout from the scandal continued to reshape Skylink from within. Under David Kim's leadership, the company implemented sweeping reforms aimed at addressing the root causes of discrimination. Mandatory diversity training became a cornerstone of employee development, with sessions led by external experts rather than internal staff. Hiring practices were revamped to eliminate bias, including blind recruitment processes and diverse interview panels. To rebuild trust with passengers, Skylink launched a campaign called Skylink Cares, highlighting initiatives to improve customer service and inclusivity. Flyers featured testimonials from employees and travelers sharing their experiences, along with promises of transparency and accountability. While some praised these efforts as genuine attempts at reform, others remained skeptical, waiting to see if actions matched words. Behind the scenes, however, resistance lingered. Longtime executives struggled to adapt to the new direction, grumbling about political correctness and overreach. Some quietly resigned, unwilling to embrace the changes. Others stayed but worked to undermine progress, spreading rumors and sowing discord among colleagues. David faced constant challenges balancing innovation with tradition. He knew that true transformation required more than policy updates. It demanded a shift in mindset across the organization. To foster this change, he held town hall meetings where employees could voice concerns and share ideas. Slowly but surely, a sense of hope began to emerge, even amidst the chaos. By the time closing arguments arrived, the courtroom was electric with anticipation. Emily delivered a passionate plea to the jury, urging them to recognize the significance of their decision. "This case isn't just about dollars and cents," she said, her voice resonating through the room. "It's about dignity, respect, and equality. Your verdict will send a message not just to Skylink but to companies everywhere that discrimination has no place in our society." Skylink's defense countered with a final appeal for leniency, arguing that the company had already taken significant steps toward reform. They emphasized the financial impact of the scandal, warning that excessive penalties could jeopardize jobs and destabilize the industry. When the jury finally retired to deliberate, the wait felt endless. Reporters camped outside the courthouse, speculating endlessly about the outcome. Inside, Marcus sat quietly, his hands clasped tightly together. He had done everything he could. Now, it was out of his hands. Hours later, the jury returned with their verdict. As the foreperson read the decision aloud, a hush fell over the room. Skylink was found liable for racial discrimination and negligence, ordered to pay substantial damages to Marcus, and establish a fund to support diversity initiatives within the company. Cheers erupted from supporters, while executives exchanged grim looks. For Marcus, the victory was bittersweet. It validated his experience and affirmed the importance of speaking up, but it also highlighted how far society still had to go. As he left the courthouse surrounded by well-wishers, he couldn't help but think about the work that lay ahead. Not just for Skylink, but for the world. Change wouldn't happen overnight. But Marcus knew one thing for certain. Silence wasn't an option. And neither was giving up. A year had passed since the incident on Flight 457, and life had changed dramatically for everyone involved. For Marcus Johnson, the journey had been long and challenging, but it had also brought unexpected growth. He was no longer just a cardiologist, known for his expertise in heart disease prevention. He had become a symbol of resilience and advocacy. His story had sparked conversations across the globe about race, bias, and accountability, inspiring countless others to speak up against injustice. Skylink Airlines too had undergone a transformation. Under David Kim's leadership, the company worked tirelessly to rebuild its reputation. The reforms implemented in the wake of the scandal weren't perfect, but they marked a significant shift toward inclusivity and transparency. Employees participated in rigorous diversity training programs, and hiring practices became more equitable. Passengers noticed subtle changes as well: improved customer service, updated policies, and campaigns celebrating diversity. While some skeptics remained cautious, many began to trust Skylink again, recognizing the effort to create meaningful change. Linda, the flight attendant who had dismissed Marcus on that fateful day, struggled to find her footing after the fallout. Losing her job at Skylink had left her financially strained and emotionally drained. Her attempts to defend herself in interviews only deepened public disdain, and she eventually retreated from the spotlight. Working at a small regional carrier gave her a fresh start, though it came with humility. Over time, Linda reflected on her actions, acknowledging the biases she hadn't realized she carried. It wasn't easy, but she began attending workshops on unconscious bias and cultural sensitivity, hoping to grow personally and professionally. As for Richard, the passenger whose medical emergency had set everything in motion, he fully recovered, thanks to Marcus's quick thinking. Grateful for the second chance at life, Richard reached out to Marcus months later to express his heartfelt thanks. "You saved my life," Richard wrote in an email, "and because of you, so many people are talking about things that matter. Thank you for being brave enough to stand up." The legal victory had given Marcus a sense of closure, but it didn't mean his work was over. If anything, it fueled his determination to keep pushing for equality. He continued speaking at conferences, partnering with organizations focused on diversity in healthcare, and mentoring young doctors from underrepresented communities. Each speech, each meeting, reinforced his belief that systemic change required persistence and collaboration. One sunny morning, Marcus boarded another Skylink flight, this time bound for Chicago to present at a medical conference. As he made his way to his seat, something felt different. The flight attendants greeted him warmly, their smiles genuine. One of them even shook his hand, thanking him for helping bring positive changes to the airline. Passengers around him nodded, approvingly, some whispering words of encouragement. For Marcus, the moment was surreal. Just a year ago, he had faced hostility and doubt in a similar setting. Now he was met with respect and gratitude. It was a reminder of how far things had come, and how much farther they still needed to go. Settling into his window seat, Marcus glanced outside at the endless expanse of clouds. He thought about the past year, the challenges, the victories, and the enduring need for vigilance. Racism and bias weren't problems that could be solved overnight. They were deeply ingrained in society, requiring constant effort to dismantle. But moments like this, moments of connection and understanding, gave him hope. During the flight, a young girl sitting nearby caught his eye. She couldn't have been older than 10, clutching a stuffed animal tightly as she stared out the window. When she noticed Marcus looking at her, she smiled shyly. "Are you a doctor?" she asked curiously. Marcus chuckled softly. "Yes, I am." Her eyes widened with admiration. "That's cool. My mom says doctors save lives." "Well," Marcus replied kindly, "we try our best." The simplicity of the exchange struck him. To this child, he wasn't a figure embroiled in controversy, or a symbol of resistance. He was just a doctor, someone who helped people. And maybe that was the most important thing, staying true to his purpose no matter what obstacles arose. When the plane landed in Chicago, Marcus disembarked with a renewed sense of purpose. The terminal buzzed with activity, travelers rushing to catch connecting flights or reunite with loved ones. Amidst the chaos, Marcus spotted a newsstand displaying headlines about Skylink's ongoing efforts to improve diversity and inclusion. The article featured quotes from employees and passengers praising the changes, alongside a photo of David Kim speaking at a press conference. Marcus paused for a moment, reflecting on the progress that had been made. It wasn't perfect, but it was a step forward. Change often started small, rippling outward until it touched every corner of society. His role in this journey had been significant, but it was far from over. There would always be more work to do, more voices to amplify, and more barriers to break. Later that evening, after delivering his presentation at the conference, Marcus found himself surrounded by colleagues eager to discuss his advocacy work. They asked questions about navigating discrimination, building coalitions, and staying motivated in the face of adversity. Marcus listened patiently, offering advice rooted in his own experiences. "Don't underestimate the power of your voice," he told them. "Even when it feels like no one is listening, there are people who care. Keep speaking up, keep pushing for change, and don't let setbacks discourage you. Progress takes time, but every effort counts." His words resonated deeply with those in attendance. Many approached him afterward to thank him, sharing stories of their own struggles and triumphs. For Marcus, these connections reminded him why he had chosen this path: to inspire others to join the fight for justice. That night, as he lay in bed reviewing notes for an upcoming project, Marcus allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he felt ready. He thought about Linda, Richard, Skylink, and all the individuals whose lives had intersected with his over the past year. Each played a part in shaping the narrative, not just of one incident, but of a broader movement toward equality. Closing his laptop, Marcus turned off the light and gazed out the hotel window at the glittering city skyline. Despite the challenges, he felt a quiet optimism. The world was imperfect, yes, but it was also full of possibility. Every act of courage, every conversation, every step forward mattered. And as long as there were people willing to push for change, there was hope. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new opportunities, and new stories waiting to unfold. But for now, Marcus rested, knowing he had done his part, and prepared to continue the journey.